Hello, General Hospital today will reveal. Anna had endured many trials in her lifetime, but nothing could compare to the harrowing days that followed her sudden abduction. Taken by a shadowy group whose methods were eerily familiar, she had every reason to believe they were connected to the underground network that once aided Peter. The facility where she was being held was a claustrophobic prison, pitch black, windowless, and suffocatingly silent. There was no sense of time, no sound beyond the occasional echoing footsteps in the hallway. It was here, in this vacuum of light and freedom, that Anna stumbled upon a horrifying truth. A revelation so explosive it could shatter the fragile peace in Port Charles. Peter August, long presumed dead, was very much alive. Not only had he survived the explosion that supposedly killed him, but he had returned with a twisted and far more calculated mission: to assume the identity of Nathan West and infiltrate the lives of his loved ones once more, especially Maxie. The first inkling of this truth came not through direct confrontation, but through sound. The unmistakable cadence of Peter's voice muffled through the walls, tainted with that cold, methodical inflection she could never forget. At first, Anna believed the darkness was playing tricks on her mind, that her ears were desperate to latch onto something familiar. But then came the conversation, cryptic yet clear enough to reveal fragments of a plan. She pressed her ear to the cold, damp wall and listened as two men discussed Phase 2 and the necessity of Maxie's emotional vulnerability. One referred to the new face in perfecting the mannerisms. Her breath caught in her throat, the dread that began to snake its way through her consciousness erupting into paralyzing clarity when, during a rare moment when the door to her room was carelessly left ajar, she glimpsed him. It was Nathan, or at least a man who looked just like him. But no amount of physical resemblance could mask the sinister aura radiating from him. His posture, the calculated blink of his eyes, and the smirk that curled to knowingly the edge of his lips. This was not Nathan. This was Peter, cloaked in the face of a man who once represented safety, loyalty, and love. Her mind reeled. Memories collided with instinct. She remembered the day of the laboratory explosion, the grotesquely burned body that no one could definitively identify. She recalled Liesl's warning not long after. Never trust a death without a body you can look in the eyes. The signs had been there all along, scattered like breadcrumbs across years of betrayal and survival. Peter hadn't died. He had vanished behind smoke and debris to construct a new skin, a new lie. Whether through surgical reconstruction, biological deception, or an even more disturbing manipulation of technology, he had found a way to don Nathan's identity. To do so wasn't just criminal, it was perverse. He was desecrating the memory of a man beloved by the community and re-traumatizing a woman still healing from layers of loss and trauma. Peter knew exactly what he was doing. He had returned to pick at Maxie's scars, the ones that had barely begun to close, with the precision of a predator, not a lover. Anna understood that exposing this truth was no longer just a personal imperative. It was a matter of saving lives. But stripped of communication, she was trapped in a silent war. Every hour, she studied the guards, memorized the layout, traced routines, and waited. Her opportunity came when one guard, distracted by an argument over the intercom, left behind a dark gray cloth napkin embroidered with an ornate L in the corner. It jolted her memory she and Liesl had used that symbol once during covert WSB operations, encoding messages in plain sight. With nothing but a sharpened edge of her nail, Anna etched the warning into the weave. P alive. Nathan is fake. Maxie in danger. She folded it carefully and wedged it deep between the back cushion and the metal armrest of the nurse's chair, a place she knew Liesl frequented whenever she was called in for clandestine medical consults. It was a long shot, but it was the only one she had. Meanwhile, back in Port Charles, Maxie remained in a medically induced coma after a fall that had caused concern among both friends and hospital staff. Her recovery was slow, but the emotional storm was just beginning to churn. Whispers spread like wildfire when news broke that Nathan West had returned. His appearance was sudden, wrapped in a fantastical story of survival, secret treatment abroad, and years of memory loss. For many, it was a miracle. Nina was overwhelmed with joy, unable to stop the tears when she saw the man she once called family step through the hospital doors. Britt, too, was visibly shaken, the hope of redemption and reunion flashing across her face before fading into doubt. But no one questioned it too deeply. They wanted to believe. They needed to believe. Grief had exhausted them and hope was an easy salve. Everyone, that is, except Liesl. Years of studying microbehaviors, psychological profiles, and genetic science had sharpened her instincts beyond normal human measure. The moment Nathan walked into Maxie's room, Liesl watched with a cold, clinical eye. His touch was too cautious, lacking the natural warmth of the man she had helped raise. When he leaned over to brush Maxie's hair back, his hand trembled not from emotion but hesitation, like a man trying too hard to replicate tenderness. Then came the smile, a shade too smug, too perfect. Liesl's heart pounded. She didn't need DNA evidence, her gut had screamed the moment he entered. But now she needed proof. Not long after, one of the hospital aides handed her the discarded napkin, claiming it had been found in the nurse's bay. Liesl unfolded it casually and froze. The handwriting was unmistakably Anna's, carved in desperation. Her blood ran cold as she read the words, the implications sinking in like lead. Everything she suspected was real. Peter wasn't just alive, he had outwitted them all again. And Anna was somewhere out there, imprisoned, silenced. But she had found a way to scream through cloth and time. Determined to confirm what she now knew in her bones, Liesl retrieved a lock of hair from Nathan's discarded comb, hidden inside the hospital locker. Using an outdated yet private lab in her basement, a remnant of her years in exile, she ran a mitochondrial DNA scan. The results left no room for doubt. The man pretending to be Nathan shared no biological markers with the West lineage. He was a fraud. He was Peter. And he was standing at Maxie's bedside. Even as Port Charles basked in the miracle of Nathan's return, a silent war was brewing beneath the surface. Britt, having caught glimpses of inconsistencies in Nathan's behavior, began to retrace Peter's last known movements, suspecting something more elaborate than she dared admit aloud. Liesl debated the moral consequences of confrontation. Could Maxie survive another betrayal, one that desecrated not just her trust, but her memory of the man she once called her soulmate, and far away Anna still captive? Felt a sliver of something dangerously close to hope. She knew Liesl. She knew that if anyone could decipher the message and act swiftly, it would be her. The door creaked open again, the same footsteps returned, and this time Peter's shadow filled the room. He stepped forward confident, wearing Nathan's face like a mask molded to perfection. But Anna didn't flinch. She had already planted the seed. Now it was just a matter of time before the truth bloomed, and with it, the reckoning that Peter August could never outrun. Liesl had spent years navigating the dangerous terrain of deception, medical manipulation, and betrayal. But nothing had prepared her for the quiet terror that gripped her the moment she unfolded the cloth napkin pressed into her hands by a nurse she had never seen before. The woman had whispered almost mechanically that the item was left behind in Anna Devane's recovery room. And something about the eerie stillness in her voice raised Liesl's instincts into full alert. When she glanced down at the folded linen and saw the faint, uneven etchings barely visible in the fabric's weave, her breath caught. There, carved in what looked like a desperate hand, trembling rushed. But unmistakably, Anna's were the words that changed everything. P alive. Nathan is fake. Maxie in danger. For one paralyzing second, Liesl stood frozen in the hallway, her brain racing faster than her pulse. There had always been something off about this miracle return of Nathan, but seeing it confirmed not as a suspicion, but a desperate plea from a woman she trusted with her life, snapped her into action. Still clutching the napkin, she staggered forward as if faint, collapsing in a dramatic swoon just outside the nurse's station. The staff rushed to assist her, and in the chaos she slipped away unnoticed, down a stairwell that led to the sub-basement of General Hospital, a place few remembered and fewer dared to access. The lab she once shared with Britt lay dormant, dust settling on shelves of outdated microscopes and cryogenic storage drawers long since abandoned. But to Liesl it was sacred ground, a shrine to the science that had both saved and ruined lives. She wasted no time. Her hands trembling but focused, she unlocked the freezer marked Archive 3B, retrieving the stored DNA profile of Nathan West, which she had preserved years ago for private unspoken reasons. Then from her pocket she pulled a zip seal envelope inside. A few strands of hair she had discreetly plucked from Nathan following the oddly formal hug he'd given her 2 days earlier. The hug had lacked warmth, lacked memory. It was a hug of choreography, not affection. As she began the extraction, Liesl worked with the precision of a woman possessed. She calibrated the PCR machine, double-checked the reagents, and initiated the sequence alignment. The process would take hours. She couldn't leave. She wouldn't. She sat in the dark corner of the lab, staring at the blinking light of the analyzer, as if it could explain what she already feared. Each minute stretched like a noose tightening around her thoughts. What would she do with the truth? What would it cost Maxie and Anna if she said nothing? When the results finally loaded, Liesl's hands trembled as she pulled the sheet from the printer. The top half of the page listed the alleles from the hospital's archived sample of Nathan West. Below them, the corresponding markers from the hair sample, and not a single match. Her knees weakened, and for a moment she had to grip the counter to stay upright. It was definitive. The man parading through General Hospital under the guise of Nathan was a complete genetic stranger. He was not Maxie's husband. He was not her daughter's father. He was not even a distant relative. He was a fabrication, a calculated, malevolent imposter. He was Peter. The clarity of that confirmation hit Liesl like a physical blow. She now understood why Anna had risked everything to etch that message. She now knew that somewhere Anna was being silenced, perhaps tortured. Perhaps on the brink of death, all while the man who had haunted their lives reinserted himself into Maxie's orbit, like a virus reactivating. But what chilled her more deeply was the knowledge that this wasn't merely about emotional manipulation. No. If Peter had gone this far, facial reconstruction, behavioral mimicry, even faking a resurrection, then his endgame was far more sinister. Maxie wasn't just a pawn, she was a target. And Liesl, perhaps the only one who saw the strings being pulled, had no allies and no time. Elsewhere in the hospital, Britt stood alone in the locker room staring at her own reflection in the mirror, haunted by the same unease. Since the moment Nathan reappeared, something within her had recoiled. The man who once felt like a brother now spoke like a stranger. There was no shared language of memory, no emotional shorthand in his voice. His gaze, once filled with integrity and quiet strength, now carried a flicker of manipulation. As if every expression was a performance. She didn't want to believe it. She had mourned Peter, buried his memory in the hope that his death had closed a dark chapter in her life. She had believed naively that maybe, just maybe, his final act had been one of redemption. But she was wrong. Britt began reviewing his reappearance with clinical precision, the inconsistencies in his story, the hesitations in his timeline, the gaps that no one else had noticed because they were too emotional, too desperate for a miracle. But Britt had loved Peter once deeply, and that love had taught her what his lies looked like. His methods were always precise, his narratives just believable enough. And his charm, that deadly charm capable of disarming anyone who dared question him. Maxie in her vulnerable state wouldn't stand a chance. The horror of it all struck Britt with full force. Peter hadn't disappeared, he had evolved. And now, with Maxie unconscious and the people around her still recovering from old wounds, he had found the perfect moment to strike. If Anna had uncovered this plot during her captivity, it meant she was now a direct threat to Peter's plan, and knowing Peter, he wouldn't hesitate to eliminate her to protect his masquerade. Britt knew she had to find Liesl. She had to warn her. But something told her Liesl already knew. As the corridors of General Hospital buzzed with the fake warmth of reunion, and as staff members whispered about the impossible return of a beloved hero, two women, each carrying unbearable truths, prepared for the storm that was coming. Peter August was alive.